for your patience. Let's see what answers we have. For your patience. Okay. Never seen live. Good morning, Nan. So, Adriana, did you saw it on the street like in a neighborhood, or did you see it maybe in a park? Was it in a big city? Was it local? Maybe at a party? Street performers? Yeah. Have any of you ever seen breaking, for example, in another type of show? Like if you saw um, In the Heights live, the Lin-Manuel Miranda show that is it's older than Hamilton, but it was his first really big Broadway musical. Jack, you have your hand raised. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Good
Um,
morning.
I don't believe I've ever seen any live breaking. I've only really ever seen it like portrayed in media and like cartoon and stuff. But I think it'd be really cool to check it
Cartoon.
out, considering like how, I don't know, it looks really high energy, really like seems like I'd have like a fun time just like checking it out or something. I don't know.
Yeah, high energy for sure. Um, you said cartoon. Can you elaborate on that part? Because I think that is it's an important thing that I don't talk about very much.
I think like uh I don't exactly remember which specific cartoon I saw it in, but like several cartoons, I believe, like sort of like have this stereotype or whatever of like a street kid or like a teenager or whatever, and then they just portray them like listening to hip hop music, uh, and like dancing on the street or whatever, and then it's usually like break dancing and stuff. And I'm not sure if it's really accurate or if it's like something that like people who do breaking like sort of agree with or whatever, but like I just see it portrayed in sort of like a stereotype type of thing or whatever.
Let me get back to these chats. I saw breaking multiple times on the street in San Francisco. There's a lot going on at Fisherman's Wharf. Oh, that's exciting. Neighborhood hosted events. Yes, that's old school. That is how breaking started. So we started today. Our topic. We're in week 5, and our topic category is B exoticism. So we're talking about. Let me just give my little introduction. We're talking about how dances, in particular black dances like breakdancing, have um, been seen as exotic or other, and how that gives them monetary value. And this dichotomy of the idea of something being other or extraordinary or exotic can be shaming, but can also be a way for uh, community to grab attention and to grab power in that way, including economic power, which is where we're going to go in the next category. So you saw at the end of that great little mini documentary by Vox that one of the things that makes breakdancing in particular have an activist flavor is this idea that not only is an individual from that hip hop community from originally from the Bronx, which was it's a neighborhood in New York City that was super, super poor and mostly both Black and Latino, mostly Puerto Rican and Cuban populace there. And those musics, the Cuban and Latin music and the hip hop beats were being mixed together. And in that like active live DJing, not like laptop DJing like we do now, where you were actually like playing with records and you would pause the record so that you could have just the break, meaning just the percussion section, and that was an invitation for dancers to do solos on the floor or, as it were, on the sidewalk. And that eventually this dance style became so embraced by the community that like it would give people something else to do and something else to have friendly competition with that was a community and an activity that allowed the youth to stay out of gangs because it gave them somewhere else to feel like they belonged and somewhere else to shine and make a mark and represent their community and earn money and give back. And you may or may not know this, but the same story is true on the West Coast with clowning that eventually became crumping. There was horrible poverty, inner city violence from gangs, selling drugs, and all of that, basically crushing the whole population. And crumping, which was originally called clowning because the first groups that did it, the first crews, would wear clown outfits. So they would like do crumping movements, but not quite as fast, and often with a lot more of comedy. And so like, I'm trying not to go down the that tangent there. So we'll talk more about that in the future. Let me end there. It is also true, since we mentioned a little bit last week about the way that appropriation works, and that sometimes when you have people from outside of a community teaching something, it gains a different look or it gains a different name. That break dancing is what the popular media called the East Coast way of dancing in the 1980s. And especially in the 1980s, remember, we didn't have the internet. So if you were going to get your dancing filmed or shown in a movie or shown on TV, it was extremely expensive because people, for the most part, most people did not have any way to do recordings. Like, there were handheld video cameras in the 1980s, but they were exorbitantly expensive. So even when you had pretty famous groups, and I have a visual for this, so pause for a moment. Even when you had famous groups getting their material out there, it often had this tinge of crass commercialism and like a group outside of the artists controlling what the content looked like. Like, you might have, let's say you have a movie company that comes in and says, I want to show your dance. We're going to make a movie that's like showing your community. But then that movie company might decide that they're going to do the casting. So yeah, some of the people from your neighborhood, they're going to hire because they're really good dancers. But then also some of the people that they're going to hire from their dance studios that they're going to add in as extras because they know that they're reliable. And that they might have some of the people in your neighborhood wearing the clothes that they normally wear. But then they might also decide, yeah, that doesn't look quite as flashy as we want or as classy as we want, whatever adjectives with implications you may want to throw in there. So they might clothe the people, or they might have a clothing company that is trying to advertise under the radar and so that clothing company might do the clothing. And so all of those elements, including names, change the final product and what gets put out in mass media. I mention this because it is now being requested by the breaking community, the B-boys and B-girls, that we, where is my share screen button? There it is. That we don't call it break dancing anymore, that it's referred to as breaking. And I'm trying to change the way that I talk about it now, so please forgive me if I'm not getting it right. So this movie, Electric Boogaloo, is it's actually like the butt of a joke because it's so cheesy, and yet it's highly influential in terms of early hip-hop dancing. West Coast dancing was called originally Electric Boogaloo. It's also weird because there's a crazy white ring group right now that's called Boogaloo, but that's not the same thing. And you'll notice a lot of the moves here are moves that you see in East Coast breaking, right? So you can see the down rocking. You can definitely see winging elements and how they've become really sharper and faster, and that will evolve into crumping in the years. But you can also see the sort of like flowing. You see some early elements of proto-whacking almost, yeah? Like, I look at that white girl in the front, the cop, the maid, and I just think that girl has done jazz dancing. I bet the record company would her in. Like, there's another white girl? Really? So that's sort of the way that I see in this clip from this movie, that you definitely have the actual authentic dancers, but then there's also a bunch of people that the movie company hired to throw in. So you can see, this is 1984, you can see that power moves are definitely happening on the West Coast. Yeah? Let's talk about this. Ooh, it's a hoopty, watch out. Okay, so let's go to this. All right, I wanted to break down some terms. So electric boogaloo is one of the like proto hip hop names for dancing on the West Coast. On the East Coast, particularly the Bronx, but not only the Bronx, is where we get breaking. So breaking is inclusive of the following moves. Top rocking, which is when you're standing up and doing footwork. Down rocking, which is when you are doing footwork, but your hands are on and off the ground. So if you think about like a crab walk or the 12-step, which is when your legs walk all the way around your arms, those are both down rocks. Power moves would be like your cartwheels, your headstands, windmills, flips, all of that stuff. And then freezes are where you freeze in an arm balance or in a headstand and you're showing off your balance. And it's usually a power move like a windmill, and then you sort of roll up into somewhere where you hold and freeze. Those are all elements of breaking. And of course there is overlap, because there always is. West Coast is mostly known for popping and locking. So let's see if we can scooch back here a little bit. We got some in here? I think so. I pulled it up for that reason. Not that this video is by any means the end all be all cool. But you can see in that little clip there. The kids are trying to do the popping movement. That would be a power move. Lots of skipping for some reason. I also think that over here, this guy on the left is doing popping and locking. And so if you think about, stop share for a second. If you think about the action of the wave and breaking it in, I'm not very good at it, please forgive me. But like when you freeze little tiny movements through a wave, that's what I think about in terms of popping. And also like little tiny sharp isolations are elements of popping. Locking is when you're definitely isolating things and you're sort of isolating one joint at the time. So that's how you end up looking like a robot. Those two things will evolve, right? You can see sort of like the elements of, eventually it becomes whacking. Also, it eventually becomes, oh, I just had a brain fart, sorry. Crumping, obviously, right? Crumping and whacking crumping involves like huge amounts of popping, because most of crumping comes from this West African contraction of the torso, and then the arms like fly around on top of that, throwing punches on top of that. So when we pull the torso back into stillness and get those arms to have the force and velocity from crumping, but the stillness of the chest, then you end up with whacking, because whacking is really about those fast movements that are isolated within the joints. And, oh, sorry, animation style. That is where popping goes to. Like, so if you have popping and locking, little tiny things in the popping and the like robot moves, as those little tiny pops go from, in the 70s and 80s, they were pretty big movements, right? Like a whole arm might move. And by the time you get to the 2000s and 2010s, the isolations start to be even tinier, so that you get that jittery hand-drawn cartoon look, which also I'm not very good at. But hopefully, does that kind of make sense? Which things I'm talking about here? Yes, no, maybe. Yeah. Okay. All right, so West Coast elements. The big thing we need to talk about here today are two things. So I wanted to give us a little bit of time to talk about breaking in particular and the I'm trying to decide which order to do this in. Let's see. We need to discuss also the element of cool, the aesthetic of cool, sorry. So we have an article today that is a academic article written by Thompson about African art and the Africanist value of what Thompson calls the aesthetic of cool. So I have, last time we talked a little bit, remember we looked at the changing of the guard and how like perfectly cold and still and ordered it was. And then we compared that to the Zulu Indlamu dance, which is also a demonstration of military organization and prowess, but it's from Africa, and how much more room there was emotionally, room for individual movement, for individuals to kick higher than the rest of their peers, and that did not, quote unquote, ruin the show. Whereas if you can imagine one of these guys kicking his leg up higher than the people he's next to, he would be in huge trouble for ruining the show, right? And then this is another image I found from 2016. So this is an Indlamu dance event where the president is actually there. And you can see that this is a very, you can see the circle formation where the community is around and allowed to like jump in. You can see that people are all being very active and throwing their bodies along. And that's just like worlds away from this icy restraint. And we need to talk about that in terms of the Africanist element of cool, because in white Eurocentric culture, where is my, oh, I have a chat. Let me come back here. Good. Okay, so Ned's saying it makes sense, but the vocabulary is a lot. So that is actually really helpful. Sorry, I'm having trouble swapping pages today. That's actually really helpful for me because that means I could make you a list of those terms and push it out for y'all to see. So speaking of vocabulary, let me stick a couple of words here in your chat. So Western, Eurocentric, subaltern. That's a big one that I'm trying to use more. And cool. Okay. So when we talk about the aesthetic of cool, and when you read Thompson's article, he's going to talk about the way that African art demonstrates power using a symbology of coolness and water, and that aesthetic, or like cultural and artistic value, embraces a powerful, fluid, still on top, but also very, where's the words list I made? I put these images in and I can't get to my notes as easily. That's okay. Both aesthetics, both the white Eurocentric valuation of coolness. I want to divide the way that we think of and use the word cool in Western Eurocentric values versus the Africanist valuation of coolness. So both of them demonstrate skills and control, and the Africanist version embraces dichotomy or contrast or uniqueness, whereas the white Eurocentric version does not embrace those things. The Eurocentric ideal of beauty, if you think about a British military man, or if you think about um, white ballets, meaning ballet blanc, meaning like all the white costumes, like Swan Lake, all of the dancers in perfect unison. The female form is supposed to be practically starved, absolutely upright, totally corseted and restrained. There is definitely sexual attraction going on when you talk about a ballerina. She's supposed to be attractive, but she does not do things that outright signify sexuality. It's rather her perceived purity and perceived asexuality or virginity that is supposed to be sexual. Like, how twisted is that? Whereas when we look at the Africanist version of that, woman's sexuality might be expressed through her movement attracting your gaze to her pelvis. That doesn't mean that she's easy or that she's actually coming on to anyone, but it's a different sort of it's just a different sort of restraint. So this is a photo that was actually used by Thompson in one of his speeches when he was talking about this article that you all read. And so if you remember the way that one of the examples he uses is the woman dancing with a look of disdain. And so she's in the center of the dance floor. Everybody is looking at her. She's totally ruling the world. But instead of her eyes being bright and shiny and expressive and reaching out and playful, in this moment where she's really enjoying herself on the dance floor, she's absolutely serene. And that control of her emotions, even in moments of pleasure, and that's one of the key things about it, even in moments of pleasure, is part of how we identify the aesthetic of cool. So this is actually the woman dancing that he's talking about in that article. And I think that's, let's give a counterexample. And I was hoping that you guys could help me out here. So can you guys think of maybe some really popular movie characters, and these could be like DC characters, film characters who you think are cool, and let's talk about whether we think that they fit into the box of as a figuring it out, whether they would fit into the box of the African aesthetic of cool or not. And let's talk about why. So I'm gonna Olaf from Frozen. Oh, he just wants a warm hug. Okay, that's a good start. Can everybody throw a character in here? I'm gonna put in one. You can call it out too. I'm gonna give you a few moments. Ooh, Stitch. Share screen for a second. There's no Batman. Did you guys know this is Tim Burton and Andy Elfman?
Vicky Vale.
Bruce Wayne.
And what do you do for a living?
Lieutenant, is there a 6-foot bat in Gotham City?
Nice outfit.
You look fine.
I didn't ask.
Okay. Here we go. So I pulled that up because it's... Oh, Pink Panther. Oh, Wonder Woman. Oh. Ooh, these are good suggestions. Okay, so I pulled up 1989 Batman because he is not cool in terms of Thompson's Africanist element description. And so we just watched a little trailer of clips from there, and you could use both the Batman or the Joker for this example. But for example, we saw Batman talking to Vicky Vale, and she's like over at his house, like maybe they're having a date, maybe not. And he's getting flirted with, maybe, question mark. It's 1989, so the lines are pretty horrible in terms of blurriness. I apologize for that. But you can see that she is interacting with him. He has an enormous crush on her, and he's totally ice cold. Right? He's like, blah, 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 blah. What do you do for a living? And then you saw the Joker later interacting with his girlfriend, and he's just ice cold, even though she's putting her hands on him. So that would not qualify as the Africanist element of cool. That would qualify as an ice cold version. Let's see. Now, the Mandalorian. So Olaf and Stitch. Let's see if I found a quick stitch. Did I find a quick stitch? Or maybe it didn't come up yet. No. Oh, I just got pictures. Okay. Videos? Whoa, there's non-cartoon Stitch? Which Stitch did you mean? Wonder Woman, Pink Panther. So let's see. Do you guys want to pick the next one? Do you want to give me a video clip, maybe? Okay. Let's go to a Stitch.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Samba? Poor man, city.
Oh, leave my mother out of this.
Merry Christmas.
It's not Christmas.
Happy Hanukkah.
Will we be
Lost. Oh, waiting.
For what?
Family.
Okay. What do you guys think? Stitch. Cool? Africanist element of cool? Is Stitch cool under pressure? I would say he was pretty cool under pressure when he was like hanging from the ceiling there, right? Is he restrained but still enjoying pleasurable moments? I would say he's kind of a little, maybe. What do you guys think? He's a bit quirky. Yeah. Quirky is acceptable under this definition. So things that are yes for elements of cool would be vibrancy, strength, skill. All of those things can happen at the same time as coolness. And so when he was talking back to the other character, and the other character was like chopping down his jokes, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Stitch is unaffected by that distraction. He's still fighting, he's still demonstrating his wit, and he's not ruffled. So I would say that would be an example of yes. Whereas, for example, the Batman white Eurocentric version, if somebody cuts off their joke, they would respond with like cold silence or just a gun probably. um, Wonder Woman, Adriana. What do you think? Does Wonder Woman are you thinking of the 1984, the most recent one? Or are you thinking old school Wonder Woman? What are you thinking, Adriana? Old school. That's possibly a better. She might have been cooler old school. So when you think about Wonder Woman, did old school Wonder Woman, did she ever break out of her business shell? Did she go dancing, for example, or did she have moments of dialogue or playfulness? And in those moments, how do you think she was acting? And while you think about that answer, I'm going to share screen here. We got to keep this one recorded.
Your heart is so full of hatred, you are not fit to be a king.
So I'm coming back to our Zoom screen. One of the things that sets Black Panther apart from other, let's just keep on using our Batman example, is that Bruce Wayne's character as Batman is basically like entirely emotionally stunted in a white guy way, right? He can barely express that he loves his butler, who's essentially his father figure. He is totally motivated by this grief of losing his parents. He really likes the ladies who are whichever lady is in whichever version, but he's just never able to like romance them properly because he's too restrained to actually have an intimate connection with him. And that's not the case with Black Panther. He is absolutely motivated by old trauma, but he's still like a more fully spread out character, right? He has emotional variation. He's able to express emotional variation to different characters, and that coexists with his self-control. And that is one of the differences between Western Eurocentric version of ice cold cool versus the African aesthetic of cool, which embraces complicatedness, which embraces uniqueness, which embraces that is not afraid of wildness to coexist with self-control. That's really what that idea comes down to. Does that kind of make sense with those examples? Yeah. And what do you guys think about The Mandalorian? How many of you guys have seen The Mandalorian? I guess that's a good question first. Yes? Yeah, Shaq, go ahead.
So sorry, I was like fixing my internet a while ago. You said like comparing The Mandalorian to like the Western sort of idea of cool, right?
Yeah, do you think that The Mandalorian counts as like ice cold Western Eurocentric restraint, or the Africanist element of cool in which a person of power, it contains the dichotomy of wildness or contains the dichotomy of emotion, passion, bright colors showing off at the same time as demonstrating self-control?
I feel like towards the beginning, it was more of like the Eurocentric sort of aesthetic of cool, where it's like he was like more reserved and more like toward the code, and then he was like doing his own sort of thing, at least from what I remember. But like I think further down throughout the series, like once he like, I guess spoiler alert, he like unmasks himself in front of the child.
Right.
Like, and then he like starts to like invite more people in his like inner circle. I feel like he becomes more like, not exactly like Black Panther type of aesthetic of cool, but still like leaning towards that than from the beginning.
Yeah, he like makes more room for dichotomy, like the idea that two things that are opposites exist at one time, right? He makes more room for that. And does that help you guys understand what this idea of the aesthetic of cool is? Now I feel like I should have like a bunch of A or B images up here. Olaf from Frozen. Let's take it. This will be our last one. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, we got to keep this short because you know Disney's going to be mad about me showing you a video on our live stream.
He's crazy.
Looking sharp as usual. Hey, whoa, I don't even recognize you. You lost so much weight.
I'll distract him while you run. Hi, Sven's family. It's nice to meet you. Because I love you, Anna. I insist you run. I understand your love. What was that?
We can't see your screen, by the way.
Hi, I'm Olaf.
Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry. Goodness, that was terrible. Yes, I see your pun going on there. Olaf is made of snow, so he has to be cool, right?
Anna, Elsa, Sven, Samantha. I don't even know it's Samantha.
So, I love Olaf, I must admit. So Olaf, cool, definitely icy because he's made of snow, yes. He's fun, he's funny, but he's definitely not in control. And I'm glad you gave this counterexample, actually, because I think one of the things that is important about the African aesthetic of coolness is that it is about power, like how you're acting in a moment where you're empowered. And that could be, one of the examples he uses is the way that a king in Africa would dress extravagantly with very bright patterns and lots of jewelry, but the captain or king in a European culture would be wearing essentially the same uniform as his army, but with just more like really subtle badges of honor on the chest, right? There's not like a whole different bright color and a floof. I mean, that did happen in Europe in certain places in time, but in general, that wasn't considered. It's not, well, interestingly, it's not considered manly in white Eurocentric culture to be flamboyant, and the African aesthetic of cool includes flamboyancy because it's not seen as putting your self-control at risk, and in the white Eurocentric version it is. So Olaf, while he's cold, he's not in control of himself at all. He can't even keep his body together, and that's part of why it's funny, is because he's lovable and funny, but his ability to even keep his actual physical form together is about nil. So he's not threatening to anyone, even though he is a magical creature that is made out of snow. I mean, that could be scary if he could hold himself together and could like freeze other things, or just be animate object. It could be scary, except that he's funny. And that's kind of a great place to transition out of this conversation. Is it could be scary if it weren't funny is really going to start coming up even more in the next couple of weeks as we talk more about the use of stereotypes by subaltern communities. That was one of the words that I just wrote in our chat. So let's define subaltern. When you're talking about colonialist studies, the colonial powers are considered the altern, meaning higher, just like you might say higher class or higher social order. The people who are in charge in colonial societies are often called the altern community, and anybody who is outside of that group is called subaltern. So they're being oppressed by the group that's above. So subaltern communities, let's talk about America specifically, when a Black performer started to become famous enough to command audiences and higher ticket prices, this would ruffle the feathers of the white community in control, right? Because they don't want to, there's all kinds of just totally racist things that you could apply to this imaginary but historical situation, like, don't be getting any ideas, or that uppity blankety blank. All those terms have to do with the conflict that arises when a person of color starts to pop out of that oppression and be able to demand higher wages, or demand that they can perform on a larger stage, or demand a higher cut of the pay that they earned. And using the aesthetic of cool is one of the ways in which people of color, especially Black performers in America, negotiated that issue. So we started today with a video of the Nicholas brothers, who were a pair of young brothers who toured the Chitlin circuit for a long time. They performed for a really long time. You can see that they're doing acrobatics. They're doing jump splits that we see now, not only in breaking, but also when you talk about death drops or dropping to the floor in ballroom culture performances, in drag culture. You can see the Nicholas brothers just did that over and over and over and over again in that video we first started with. And you can also see that they're using the going up and going down the stairs, which was absolutely a reference to Bojangles. You can also see, here, let me make a little screen grab. Boop. Because it's more fun to watch it. You can see that they are Let's see those stairs, friends. Right? Split falls. Giant set of stairs that goes up one side and down the other. Is that technique behind them? They're wearing tuxedos. So they're again playing with that coolness and suaveness and classiness that Bojangles use to gain more respect. And these guys are the epitome of the aesthetic of cool. You can see that they are positively shining with sweat. And yet their facial expressions here, right? They've just been dancing hard, like jumping 3 feet in the air over and over and over and over and over again. And yet their facial expressions are very serene. Their hands are moving very gracefully and smoothly. And even though they would have every reason to be positively panting or like laughing, catching their breath, showing off the work that they've been doing, instead they have this coolness that they're putting over the top. Right? Oh yeah, no problem. Of course we can bow for you guys. Of course. Yeah, no problem there. Nothing stressful going on. Those elements of restraint, after showing such incredible ephebism, youthful strength, physical prowess, are part of the way that especially African American performers would basically tone police their person, their being in public, in order to make it more acceptable to white audiences. And that is definitely a great way to leave us leading into our upcoming conversations, because we're going to start talking even more about minstrelsy and why we have sort of these really strong dichotomies, right, about strength and coolness or suaveness, about jumping up and down off the floor and looking like you stand up gracefully in a tuxedo suit. How do those things come together all the time culturally? And a lot of that has to do with race relations, cultural influences, both from Africa and from the oppressive like Victorian and pre-Victorian white Eurocentric Puritan influences. And those two things definitely come together in a way that looks very American, I think. Do you guys have any closing questions or remarks? Is there anything that doesn't feel clear or anything that came up for you guys? I'd love to just hear your voices for a little bit.
Thank you for class today. It was really interesting. I learned a lot of new things.
Thank you. Are there any other you were mentioning vocabulary. There was a lot of vocabulary. Are there any vocabulary words that you want me to re-clarify or anything like that?
No, it was good because it was just in the beginning, because I know some of these words. It was like the dance moves, but also like all these other things. But I'm still kind of like new to using all the words like popping and whatnot. So it just takes me for a second to understand what the movement is.
Yeah.
But then, yeah. But you did a good job of explaining it.
Thanks. I think this week you guys have a try it yourself. Popping up.
You got to try it yourself last week as well, where we filmed ourselves.
Oh, good. Maybe it was.
Oh, wait, maybe that was for a different class. I'm kind of getting them confused.
No, you're right. It was last week. So last week the try it yourself had, what was it? Hip isolations, limb throws, gum through suit. Oh yeah, and you had top rock to down rock. So if you guys haven't done the try it yourself from last week, I hope it kind of connects together with those terms that we were using today. Like top rock, which includes up rock, down rock, which is the hands on the floor part, power moves, the big acrobatic stuff, freezes when you're like freezing in the middle of a power move, popping, locking, electric boogaloo, which was sort of pre-popping and locking, and what are the other things we said today? Clowning, crumping, animation style, whacking, yeah, all of those. And those are, maybe this is a good vocabulary closer. The term that I use is dance styles, or they're sort of subgenres of hip hop. So if I say hip hop dance, in my mind, I'm including all of those things. And sort of old school hip hop starts with those two branches of East Coast and West Coast. But of course, we know in this class, we're talking about everything that comes before that. And like, so we'll take a little element here. Today we looked at that video and we talked about how breaking, East Coast and West Coast have some overlap in what those moves might be, and that we know that those elements come from community dances that go much farther back into the history. So we're connecting things like, you may have seen the acrobatic movements in those Nicholas Brothers videos that are reflected in the breakdancing that happened 60, 70, 80, 90 years later. So the more that we have terms that can help us look at the way that a big action might evolve in speed or placement, the more it'll be easier for us all to look at a dance and start to recognize the roots. And that's one of our big goals. And it's always okay if you don't have a dance vocabulary word with me, just try and describe it. They took their finger and they swirled it in a circle while their fist mostly stayed still. They opened their hand up like they were saying, I'm 5 years old. It's okay to use like everyday language to describe dance moves. You don't need to know. No, it's really helpful to know the dance terminology, but don't let that stop you if you are trying to describe some movement. Good, just go for it. Because a lot of the time there's different words. Any other questions out there? Confusions? Anything you disagree with? I would love that. I love it when you guys bring me something that you disagree with.
Oh, Professor?
Yes.
I just have a quick question regarding the try it yourself assignment. Like, so I already did the last week's one, but this is for future try it yourselves assignment. So you say after you watch the videos, you're supposed to upload a video of yourself trying out 3 of the steps. Like, I'm a little bit confused. Like, did you mean like choose 3 out of the 4 videos? Because
yeah, and you don't have to do the whole, like all the movement in every video. It could really be, say there was a video on top rocking and one of the steps was an up rock and one of the steps was a kid and play. You could just do the kid and play from that video. You don't have to like learn the whole thing through. Just an experiment.
Yeah, I just chose the first 3 because the top rock to down rock was too tricky for me. So
tricky. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Good question.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? And if not, I will be off to cardio dance. All good? Okay. Thank you guys so much for coming. It's always a pleasure to have you here, and I love it when you bring me questions. So I will see you next week.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye, Professor. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.